I begin. Drafting a denim jacket is not as difficult as it may be in its appearance. So, in today's video, yes, hi everyone, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, ladies and gentlemen, from wherever you're watching from. Welcome back to TOPTS Tailoring Studio. In today's video, I'm going to share with you the easy way on how to draft this fascinating denim jacket step by step as per this request. So just watch this video up to the end. Ladies and gentlemen, let us jump straight to our denim practical pattern drafting class. As usual, I first draw this one vertical line, which will be my center back guideline, and this one horizontal line on the top of my working pattern paper, and this will be my neck and shoulder guideline. Then I label this point A, which is my starting point for most of my calculated body measurements. I can now continue determining other horizontal lines that are needed for my denim project. So, from starting point A, I measure downwards denim full length plus 0.5 inch length is. My denim full length is 23 inches plus 0.5 inch length is, giving me 23.5 inches. So I mark 23.5 inches here. After, I square across a straight hemline. Then from this hemline, I mark upwards 1.75 inches for my hemband. Also, I square across a straight hemband line. Next is to determine chest or underarm line. From starting point A, I measure downwards chest measurement divided by 4. My chest measurement in this video is 36 inches. I divide by 4, giving me 9 inches. So I mark here my 9 inches. After, I square across a straight line like this. Next is to insert back neck. I come to this line from starting point A. I measure inwards chest measurement divided by 12 for the back neck width. My chest is 36 divided by 12, giving me 3 inches. Then from this 3-inch point, I mark upwards 1 inch for back neck depth. Then I create a temporary curved line like this. Next is to input my shoulder measurements. Still from starting point A, I measure inwards shoulder to shoulder measurements divided by 2 plus 0.5 inches seam allowance. My shoulder to shoulder measurement is 15 inches. I divide by 2, giving me 7.5 inches plus 0.5 seam allowance, giving me a total of 8 inches. So I mark 8 inches here. Then from this 8-inch point, I mark downwards 0.5 inches for shoulder drop or slant. After, I connect this highest shoulder point to this shoulder drop point to create shoulder slope line. Also, at this shoulder drop point, I mark inwards 0.5 inch for across back. Then I square this distance to the chest line or underarm line. After, I draw this straight line, which will be the armhole rise guideline. Next is to insert my chest measurements. I come to the chest line. From this point, I measure inwards. Chest measurement divided by 4 plus is allowance. My chest measurement is 36 divided by 4, giving me 9 inches. Here is my 9 inches plus 1 inch is allowance. So the total is allowance I will have added to my back pattern is 2 inches. That will be the same with the front, totaling to 4 inches of is allowance that is added on this denim of mine. But you can add less or more is depending on the fit you want. Okay. Next, I come back to this line. I divide this distance by 2 to get the midpoint. I now connect this point to this point and this midpoint to side seam point in a curvy way to create my back armhole curve. Next is to widen my back neck. I come here at the highest shoulder point. I mark inwards 0.5 inches. Also at the starting point A, I mark downwards 0.25 inches. Then I connect these points together with a curved line to create my new denim neckline. Okay. Next is to work on the hemline. I square these chest measurements divided by 4 plus 1 is allowance to the hemline. After I connect these points together like this. Next is to shape my denim side bottom. I come to the hemline. I mark inwards 0.75 inches. Then I now create my shaped backside seam line like this. Ladies and gentlemen, if you are enjoying my pattern drafting videos, please hit that subscribe button down below and don't forget to turn on the notification bell so that you will be notified whenever I upload a new video. Guys, just support this video. If you've seen it, it's good. Support it. Okay, we continue. Next is to determine my back yoke. From starting point A, I measure downwards 4.5 inches for my back yoke height. Then I connect it to this armhole rise point to create the back yoke line. Still, I come to this midpoint. I mark inwards 3.5 inches. Then I come to this hemband line. I measure this distance divided by 2 to get the midpoint. After I connect these points together like this. Next is to fit my back slightly. I come to this midpoint line. I mark that intake of 0.5 inches. So on this side, I mark 0.25 inches. Also this side, I mark 0.25 inches. After, I connect these points like this to create the back dart legs. As you can see, our back pattern is almost ready. Next is to insert seam allowances on the sides and the shoulder line. I come to the chest line. At this point, I mark outwards 1 inch seam allowance. Also at the hemband line, I add 1 inch seam allowance. After, I create my seam allowance with a broken line like this. For the armhole area, we already added 0.5 inches seam allowance during calculations. Next is to remark my hemband. I measure from center back line inwards. I jump the 0.5 inch that intake we added. Then I continue measuring all the way to seam allowance point. Now I will measure from center back line here will be the new width of my hemband. Also, I square up my hemband side seam line. Also, the shoulder line, I mark seam allowance of 0.5 inches. So, ladies and gentlemen, our denim back pattern drafting is done. Next is to cut out the back pattern in this way. So here is our untrimmed back pattern. Now we will first use this back pattern to trace out the front line. Then after we shall continue with the trimming. Next, I get my new pattern paper. Then I lay my back pattern draft. I start tracing out these lines in this way. Trace out the chest line, hemband line, denim hem line, neck and shoulder line guide. I can now remove my back pattern draft. Then I continue highlighting my traced lines. I draw one vertical line at one side of my pattern paper, which will be my center front guideline. Next is to insert my front neck. At this center front guideline, I measure inwards chest measurement divided by 12. My chest is 36 divided by 12, giving me 3 inches for my front neck width. Still at this center guideline point, I measure inwards shoulder to shoulder measurements divided by 2 plus 0.5 inch seam allowance. My shoulder to shoulder measurement is 15 inches. I divide by 2, giving me 7.5 inches plus 0.5 inch is allowance, giving me 8 inches. Then from this 8-inch point, if you remember at the back neck, we went up by 1 inch from the neckline. Then from the shoulder line, we dropped our shoulders by 0.5 inches. Altogether giving us a total of 1.5 inches. So I come back to this 8-inch point. I mark downwards 1.5 inch for shoulder drop. After I connect this shoulder drop to this neckline with this point like this. Next step is to widen my front neck. I bring the back pattern, then I measure from this neck point to the shoulder drop point. Here I have 5 inches. So I copy these 5 inches to my front. From this front drop point, I measure upwards the copied 5 inches. So here is my 5 inches. Then I come to this point, I measure downwards 3.5 inch for front neck depth. After I connect this point to this point in this way to create front neckline curve. Still at this shoulder slant line, I measure inwards 0.75 inches for across front width. Also, I square these measurements to the chest line. After, I square up a temporary straight line. Then from this chest line, I measure upwards. Chest measurement divide by 16. My chest is 36. I divide by 16, giving me 2.25 inches. So I mark here 2.25 inches. Also, I mark 2.25 inches here. Next is to insert chest measurements. I come to the chest line from this center front guideline point. I measure inwards. Chest measurement divide by 4 plus 1 inch is allowance. My chest 36 divide by 4 giving me 9 inches plus 1 inch is allowance. Next is to connect these points in this way to create front armhole curved line. After, the next thing is to work on the hemline. I square these measurements to the hemline. Also, I draw a temporal front side seam line. Next is to shape my denim hemline. At this point, I mark inwards 0.75 inches. After, I now create a shaped front side seam line. Next is to determine the front yoke. From this point, I mark downwards 2.5 inches, but you can measure more than this. It depends on the style and the design you are creating. As for me in this video, my front yoke would be 2.5 inches from this point. After, I square across a yoke line like this. Next is to insert my denim design lines. At the yoke line from the center front guideline, I measure inwards apex to apex or nipple to nipple divide by 2. My client's nipple to nipple measurements is 8 divided by 2 giving me 4 inches plus 0.5 inch seam allowance giving me 4.5 inches. So I mark 4.5 inches here. Then I come to hemband line, not hemline. I measure this distance divide by 2 to get the midpoint. After, I connect these points like this to create my denim front design guideline. Then, at this guideline, I mark 1.25 inches on this side. Also, this side, I mark 1.25 inches. At the hemband line, I mark 1 inch on this side. Also, this side, I mark 1 inch. Now, I create my front design lines like this. Next is to fit in my denim by inserting that intake of 0.5 inches. So, at hemband from this design line, I mark outwards 0.25 inches. Also on this side, I mark outwards 0.25 inches. After, I first need to determine the position of my apex or nipple to nipple. I measure from this line downwards 10 inches for the bust or apex point. Then at the apex point, I mark downwards 1 inch for that point. I now connect my dart legs to these points in this format. Okay, as you can see, our denim front design lines are ready. Next is to resize my denim hemband. I measure from center front guideline inwards, jumping 0.5 inch dart intake that we added. Here is my new hemband with this line. Next is to insert my denim front design pocket. I come to front yoke line. At this red line or middle line, I mark this side 2 inches for pocket flap width, also this side 2 inches. Still at this point, I mark downwards flap height 1 inch, on this side 1 inch. Then the middle line I mark downwards 1.5 inches. Now, by connecting these points together, I create my flap design in this way. You can leave it like this, it's okay, or you can input a kissing pocket or a functional pocket. So for this tutorial, let us make a design, a functional pocket. So I come to this point, I mark slightly 0.25 inches inwards. Also this side I mark slightly 0.25 inches. After, at this point, I square down straight lines like this. Next is to insert the pocket height. At this line, I measure downwards pocket height of 4 inches. On this side also 4 inches. Then middle line 4.5 inches. Still, by connecting these points together, I create my denim design pocket in this way. Next is to insert the button holder. I come here at this point, I mark outwards 1 inch for button holder. Hemline I mark 1 inch. After, I square up a straight line like this. Next is to input the position of my buttons. From the neckline point, I mark downwards 0.75 inches for the first button. Also at the hemband, I first find the midpoint, then I mark the position of the button. Next, I divide this distance by 5 to determine the position of other buttons. Here I have 18.25 inches, divide by 5, giving me 3.6 inches. That means button to button, the distance will be 3.6 inches. So here is the next button, 3.6 inches. To the next button, 3.6 inches. To the next button, 3.6 inches. To the next button, 3.6 inches. As you can see, all our buttons are now positioned. Next is to add seam allowance to the side. I come to the chest line, I mark outwards 1 inch seam allowance. Hemband 1 inch seam allowance. After, I square a straight broken seam allowance lines like this. Also at the shoulder line, I add 0.5 inch seam allowance. Wow! Ladies and gentlemen, look how our pattern is printing the beautiful look of our denim. I can't wait to see you making it in fabric. Create and inbox me or send me the images of how yours is. Our denim front pattern is ready. Next is to trim off our pattern in this way. Before I continue with the trimming, I first trace out the pocket and its flap. Here is my pocket and its flap. I can now continue with the trimming. Okay guys, we are done with the trimming of the front. This is my center front panel. This one middle front panel. This one is front side panel. And this one is front yoke panel. This one is pocket. And this one is the pocket flap. So all the 7 pieces for the front pattern are here. Next, I continue trimming the back pattern. Don't forget, this side of the center back is on fold, also the back hemband and the back yoke. All those sides are on fold. We continue with the trimming. We are done with the trimming. As you can see, this is the center back panel. This one back side panel, this one back hemband, and this one back yoke. So ladies and gentlemen, we've come to the end of our denim jacket practical pattern drafting class. Thank you so much for watching all the way from where we began from. I hope you can now come up or make your own. So guys, that's what I had for you in today's video. Next, watch out for the denim sleeve pattern drafting. So it will be my next video. So my friend all the way from India, this has been your video and it has been your most requested video. Thank you so much for supporting, following Top Stitch Tailoring Studio. I sign out. See you in my next video. Bye bye. God bless you. Shalom.